Along the west coast of North America, from the northern tip of Vancouver Island to Baja, California, runs a great and fertile ocean current. The upwelling waters of the California current, mixing the cold and deep with the warm and shallow, stir the nutrients that feed great congregations of fish and wildlife, as well as the people who make their living here. The California current unites the coastal life of a continent, the flow of its waters connecting food webs and human communities for 2,000 miles under a single ecological umbrella. But the California current also flows with increasingly familiar signs of degradation. This, coupled with our increasing demands on the ocean, brings a special challenge to those who would begin to manage this massive ecosystem with a new perspective.
I think marine spatial planning is a really great idea. In California, we've done some of that already when the Coastal Act was passed in 1976. One of the concerns I have being here in Southern California is if you look at the plan for the United States for marine spatial planning, you've got the east coast of the U.S. broken into 5 different regions. On the west coast, we're one big region, And so I think logistically, trying to bring everybody together from a coastline that's so huge is going to be challenging.
It is a challenge now being met by a movement of marine stewardship that is growing along the California current. In the California communities of Ventura, Morro Bay, Elkhorn Slough, and Humboldt Bay, to Port Orford, Oregon, and the San Juan Islands of Washington. On beachfronts, estuaries, rivers, forests, farms, and ranches, people are coming together to re-examine their lifelines to the coast and coming up with local solutions for sustaining them. This new commitment to ocean stewardship is perhaps most intimately witnessed in the coastal village of Port Orford, Oregon, where fishing runs in the blood.
When I was little, I guess 12 years old, and on the weekends, Dad would take me fishing with him. Well, it was Sunday, every Sunday morning, we're supposed to go to church. And I finally got to where, you got an option here. You can either go to Sunday school or you can go fishing with me. Me in a little costume, decorated up like an angel, just wasn't getting it. There was no hands down about it. I'm going fishing.
Over the past decades, Port Orford's fishing community has felt unsettling shifts in its waters, in the decline of salmon and rockfish, and in the boom and bust of its urchin fishery. Disempowered and disenchanted by laws handed down from on high, the fishermen of Port Orford formed the Port Orford Ocean Resource Team, or PORT, an NGO to give them voice in preserving their marine environment. PORT has developed a communal vision to sustain their fisheries and their ecosystem as one. It is a vision of hope forged by hard times.
Back when it was timber and fishing and there was some mining and things started to collapse, it was really a horrible time for our community. When my husband and I got married, we started rolling into a salmon disaster, and then we had a groundfish disaster. We had the collapse of the urchin fishery here. It wasn't looking very good for our future, for even being able to stay and live here around our family that had been here, my family, since the early 1900s. I asked my husband, do you think we're going to be able to stay in fishing? Do you think this is going to work, or does there need to be a plan B? And he was very optimistic. He figured that he could, continue to fish no matter what would happen. And I felt like he had his head in the sand. I thought that, basically things were not looking good for our community at all, especially because we're all small boat fishers. So we decided we were going to have to organize, and believe me, fishermen don't want to get organized, and yet they did. They knew that it was going to be really important, so they put aside their really individualism that drove them in fishing to want to be out on the water by themselves. And they came to the table and they said, what are we going to have to do to keep fishing and to make management better? What should our role be, and what could it be?
So that's what really kind of started me down this road. I wanted to have some voice in our future here, instead of letting other people tell us what our future is going to be. We wanted to be part of it.
We needed to be proactive to manage our fisheries rather than respond to crises and be victim over and over and over.
The Port Orford team didn't wait for the government to impose more regulations. They imposed their own.
First of all, we designated a stewardship area, the Port Orford Stewardship Area, which is basically our traditional fishing grounds. We do venture outside of that area, but 90% of the fishing we do takes place within that economic range.
So being at the table, a legitimate partner, and raising our concerns, and that's where the stewardship area comes in. We as partners have got to go up through that political ladder and get it done.
Port Orford Stewardship Area encompasses some 1,300 square miles of state and federal waters, as well as the upland watersheds that feed into them. Here, Port nurtures collaboration to better coordinate conservation and resource management.
And so we set both economic and ecological goals for that area. Embraced being proactive on a conservation standpoint, so we were pro-marine reserve when it was time for marine reserve, so we got that taken care of. We also created a MPA adjacent to the marine reserve.
Among the area's brightest beacons is the Redfish Rocks Marine Reserve, a haven for marine life, including rockfish that can live a century or longer. With this solid foundation in place, the team is working to merge the needs of the Port Orford community with the limits of their sustaining waters. An effort now being touted among the nation's most powerful examples of ocean conservation on the local scale. Port Orford's ecosystem-based project is officially recognized by the state of Oregon.
As part of this kind of first ever agreement with a local coastal community to help us really as we move into more and more and better science-oriented management of the nearshore marine environment that the state owns and manages.
Just the fact that we had been on the ocean for all of those years and that many people for that long. We actually can propose some really valuable conservation measures based on what we know.
Okay, fish on!
And so what we're trying to do is use the local knowledge and the science together for conservation.
Port has initiated more than a dozen local science projects, mapping marine habitat at Redfish Rocks, analyzing juvenile rockfish habitat, and undertaking the region's first survey for seaweeds.
Even in this late collection, we still got 60 different species of seaweeds out there, and about 12 of them were new records to Oregon. And some of them may be new species, which we're quite excited about. So when you're looking out at the ocean, the primary producers that provide food for everybody else in the photic areas, I'm not talking about the deep ocean now, but in the photic areas that would be the phytoplankton and the seaweed. So they're very important as being sort of fundamental to the ecosystem out there. So at one time I figured out that it took about 1,000 pounds of kelp to make 1 pound of salmon. And I thought that's something people should learn about, because we all value salmon, but if we're going to have salmon, we have to have things at the bottom of the food chain as well.
The team has also taken direct measures to ensure a more sustainable catch, voluntarily releasing rockfish that are about to spawn.
We want to nip in the bud before there's a problem. How long can you go? How long can you catch all the big females?
Well, the problem is
right.
It's going to be before, when they realize there's a problem, it's too late.
Right.
That's what always happens on all the fish. We'd like to address a problem and find out before and address it, so we don't have the problem.
And then it's going to be released.
That's where research reservists came in. We've gotten more scientific study in the last 4 years than we've gotten all my lifetime down here.
And we're going to get a lot more.
You know, working on a project right now with acoustic tagging with a grad student from Oregon State University. He's putting acoustic buoys out in our marine reserve area and acoustic tags in the fish, and he's going to be able to tell us if those fish are actually moving out of the reserve, if we're protecting the stocks or not, and then we can adjust the boundaries of our reserve or change our goals.
The deeper the team looked into the future of their fishery, the more they realized they needed to look beyond the sea. To protect their waters, ultimately, they would have to look to the land.
I'm Michael Murphy, the City Administrator of the City of Port Orford. This is our bioswale project here. The idea of that is to take and collect all the storm water that comes off of this parking lot with about 100,000 vehicle visits per year. You can imagine there's quite a bit of pollutants that come in here. Comes in the storm drain here. After it goes through here, it works its way into this bioswale, and these plants and the soil microbes here detoxify and treat any toxic materials in the water. It helps to clean things up, remove the sedimentation. The purpose of the ordinance is naturally to improve water quality, and we're one of the few communities that actually has a stormwater ordinance of this nature. The idea is to show people how simple it is to make a great improvement. And, you know, it doesn't cost a lot, it's not difficult, it's not expensive, it's fairly easy to do.
Aaron Longton, the president of the organization, and I conducted 176 hours of outreach for the Stormwater Ordinance from February to June of 2009. And the result of that extensive outreach was the ordinance being passed with not a single public comment against the ordinance.
And so if we can improve it here before it gets to the ocean, we've improved the ocean health. And the oceans have been under assault worldwide. It's nice to try to take care of that. So make a little difference in our own spot, and maybe others will do the same thing, and ultimately everything improves.
Upland here, we have beautiful watersheds that are in pretty good shape. One in particular that's got a lot of attention is the Elk River, which is the closest to our community here. It has a great run of fall salmon that we also depend upon here as a resource. There are a couple wilderness areas up in there that will benefit that ecosystem and keep it intact.
All right, buddy, you got it. Point the handle straight up. Point the handle straight up. Pull her in this way. Yeah.
One of the economic staples of Port Orford is the annual fall run of Chinook salmon. It is one of the strongest runs remaining along the west coast.
It's an Elk River native Chinook, 30 pounds. We just caught it right here out of my friend Bill's hole. Oh, it was teamwork. He netted it, he did a great job. But what a battle. Isn't that a nice one?
The salmon that feed Port Orford spawn in the upper reaches of the Elk River. They are living testament to the river's purity, to its clean, cold water, filtered and shaded by the high mountain forests.
Right along the wall.
While many of the coast's greatest salmon runs are no longer, their forests cut, their waters dammed or muddied by erosion, the Elk River salmon still run strong.
Best signs is lots of jacks. I mean, they're almost like a pest. There's so many. You can't even get your bait down to the big ones. Boy, that's a fat jack, isn't it?
And the townspeople of Port Orford have taken steps to keep it that way. In 2009, Port Orford made history when Elk River's upper watershed was designated as wilderness, and the underwater habitat known as Redfish Rocks became Oregon's first marine reserve. The first place where both land and sea received the highest protection possible in the same year. Soon after, the people of Port Orford gathered to celebrate their new ridge to reef wilderness.
This river, born of rocks in the Klamath and Siskiyou Mountains, flows freely to the sea. The elk's green glow is lit from within. Once in a lifetime, perhaps, a river is loved and then protected. We celebrate today the gift of these green waters. Salmon and forest, settler and steward. Like a water drop high in the mountains heads to the ocean, we too complete our journey. Today and forever, the elk stays wild and free. The river gods have spoken. Jim, Jerry, hundreds of others. You listened deeply, and you listened well.
We needed to bury that tired old idea that loggers and fishing people and ranchers and environmentalists were on different sides. Those days are sort of over. It's clear that people can, from all of those different arenas, can come together and make good things happen, and that's what's going on here.
This is really a dream that some in this area have had for well more than a quarter of a century to get some certainty of protection for this absolutely fabulous river, its tributaries, the surrounding mountains and forests, the old growth, and it's just been a long time coming, but sometimes great things take a long time to get done.
Port Orford, Elk River area is really interesting if you think about it. We have foresters here who have advocated for wilderness designation for forest, which puts it off limits for logging. So that's an interesting thing for a forester to do. And now we have fishermen, commercial fishermen, who are advocating special treatment for the ocean, respect for the resources. I think the change around here will come from the local people who have been here long enough to have a feel for the place and appreciate it and recognize how important it is to sort of turn the tide before there's nothing left to appreciate.
You know, we really need the focus to be on the ocean now. It hasn't been in the past, and it's really important. So we see clearly that jobs can go with conservation, that we can continue to fish, let's extract fish from the ocean, and do it right, and have a conservation ethic around how we fish, and still have our jobs and have our income for our families.
I'd like to look at this as kind of a generational aspect. I mean, like my father, there was never any question that there was an abundant timber, abundant fish. That was then, and this is now. And my son, he's going to be faced with different challenges. There he goes. You know, nothing ever got done without one person having a great idea and moving it forward. So I just think everybody needs to be conscientious and work hard towards a better future. And if everybody is conscientious about it, then slowly things will move in a better direction.
There are many lessons for us to learn from these ocean pioneers. The first of which is that their success or failure is ours. We are all, in essence, ocean pioneers, steering uncharted waters in a sea of rapid change.
People were very happy with it. Or charging the conservative.
It will take all of us to turn the tide on ocean frontiers from coast to coast. A new way of thinking, a new way of living, in concert with the sea, in consideration of those yet to come. Now is your opportunity to get involved.